Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Inept General bringing you some Total War Warhammer 2 news. Now, there's been a bit of information circling around online for sort of the past 24 hours, and I was in a bit of sort of two minds whether to cover it or not. But what we do have is a potential leak of the title of the next DLC for Total War Warhammer 2, and that leak is that the next one will be called The Queen and the Crone. Now, we very much for a long time suspected that the two next legendary lords will be Alarielle and Helbron, both respective religious leaders, basically, of the High Elves and the Dark Elves in turn. So we kind of long predicted that this would be the pairing, but it's interesting to see it pop up from an external source potentially. Now, where did this information come from, you may ask? And it was put on the forums by a sort of much more investigative person than I, who found this bit of information here on IMDb, pertaining that actor by the name of sort of Joel worked, and he did the voice work for the Lawmaster of Hoeth, and something known as the Shadow Walkers in the Queen and the Crone DLC. Now, Shadow Walkers, you might ask, what are they? Now, they're actually what known as Shadow Warriors, but we'll get into that a little bit. The one thing I want to address here is that sort of IMDb, this source is not exactly an impeccable source, and the fact that he's been so much more detailed than any other voice actor on the Total War Warhammer 2 IMDb website is a little bit strange as well. So this could just be someone having a laugh, throwing this in there. I'm not sure. I haven't dug into it. I'm unfortunately not an investigative reporter, but you know, it's interesting to know that it might be out there through something as weird as someone digging up something randomly on IMDb. Now, getting back to the Shadow Walkers, as I said, they are copies of, or not copies, higher levels of Shadow Warriors, essentially kind of the champions of Shadow Warriors. Now, this is interesting in the fact that the Queen and the Crone, in the fact that these are a High Elf unit, and Alarielle being the kind of High Elf ambassador for this DLC, isn't really that tied to the Shadow Warriors. She doesn't really have that much of a link to them. Rather, actually, a character by the name of Alif Anar, the Shadow King, who we cover slightly in the Helbron story. They're kind of intrinsically tied in their histories. And by the way, guys, if you want the story on either of these two women, Alarielle or Helbron, do check the top right-hand corner now, or you'll find links to their lore stories in the description below. They're great stories, fascinating characters, but we're not going to get into too much detail about them here. I cover them quite extensively in those videos and the stories they've been involved in. But anyway, Alif Anar is the Shadow King, and he's more tied to the Shadow Warriors. Now, I remember reading somewhere, and I might get this wrong, but I think it was maybe just for the race packs that maybe get 4 legendary lords in Total War Warhammer 2, but I'm not 100% sure on that. So it might be the lord packs as well, but I could not find, I was trying to re-find the blog or the FAQ that answered some of those questions, but I just couldn't find it. I couldn't remember where it was. If you guys know, drop it in the comments below. But so far, the title itself just suggests sort of those 2 legendary lords coming on rather than an extra 2 with them. But interestingly, if they do chuck in 4 legendary lords, the fact that the Shadow Warriors are in there might hint at Alif Anar. But again, I might be misremembering that. It might just be the 2 legendary lords, in which case we're probably just going to get Shadow Warriors, and then an upgraded, I guess an upgraded version of Shadow Warriors would be the Shadow Walkers, and he's the actor who did the voice for those units. Now, what else might we expect in this DLC? And if any of you watching have ever seen my future DLC predictions video, which I released a while ago, you'll know kind of what I'm thinking along these lines. So let's start with the High Elf representative, and that is Alarielle, the Ever Queen, the spiritual leader of the High Elves, very much their kind of sense of hope in its own right, the ambassador for their goodwill for life, one of their goddesses as well. But that is her, and she is tied to a couple of units. There's the hero unit, known as the Handmaidens, who tend to form up her personal bodyguard, a sort of melee-focused hero unit. Now, because we already have the generals of the princes and princesses, I'm not sure if we'll see the Handmaidens. We might do. It'll be interesting to see them as heroes in terms of what role they might play on the hero scale, but looking forward to seeing them. And more interestingly, the unit I really want to see are the Sisters of Avalon, who fire magical bows, are extremely good shots, and they also represent the Everqueen. Now, the Everqueen, if she was starting when she's starting the lore, would start in the province of Avalon in Ulthuan, but they might think that's a bit too close to Tyrion. We'll have to wait and see on that one. Now, as far as there are a number of other High Elf units missing, but I'm not going to go through every other missing High Elf unit. They could really throw in any of them. But if you want a full list of the missing High Elf units, do check the top right-hand corner now to find my actual missing units from Total War Warhammer 2, and you will find there just a full list of all the armies, the units they're missing from the game they're based on, which is 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy. So do check that out if you're interested. Other than that, moving on to Helbron, who is the High Priestess of the Cult of Cain. Now, interestingly enough, the Cult of Cain is the god of murder and the most worshipped Dark Elf god. The issue with her is that most of the units associated with her, stuff like the Executioners, which are actually all come out of her city that she controls, stuff like the Assassins, the Dark Elf Assassins, are all tied to the Cult of Cain, and she's actually probably the most directly influential over those units. So you can't tie necessarily sort of thematically units with her because we have most of them already. So then we're looking at the idea of maybe it being more of a gender-themed pack, in which case we have the Everqueen, we have the Handmaidens, we have the Sisters of Avalon. So what kind of female-looking units are we missing in the Dark Elf army? And the top ones I can think of are the Medusas. Now we have all the kind of serpenty animations for some of the Tomb King units. They look like they figured that out. I imagine those movements will translate over to the Medusas fairly easily, and you're just kind of giving them maybe a bit of a reskin in the way they attack. So that would kind of be the Bloodrack Medusas. And they also have a unit, a sort of chariot unit known as the Bloodrack Shrine, which we might eventually see sort of further down the road. And in terms of the female sort of pack keeping it together, we also have the Sisters of Slaughter. Now, these guys are kind of old gladiator, well, not old gladiators, they're gladiator women, some of the fiercest fighters in the Dark Elf army. They obviously have shields, so they might be kind of a alternative to Witch Elves in the fact that they can offer missile resistance as well. But that's about it for the kind of my rough ideas of what's in the packs. I said I wasn't going to go through every unit. It's interesting if we finally have the title, the Queen and the Crone, kind of what we expected, but interestingly. But as I said, guys, at the beginning, take this all with a pinch of salt. And we'll have to kind of wait and see. It's not too long now, but we did have it potentially leaked early and just wanted to let you guys know. Can't wait to see it confirmed. Looking forward to it, guys. Hope you are too. Tell me what you think about the source and whether you think that might be reliable or someone just messing with us. Anyway, guys, as always, a huge thank you all for watching, and I hope to catch you all on the next one.